know you're all eager to get to it, so here we go. No, I appreciate everybody coming. We're going to start with the safety meeting. This year, the format's basically going to be just our normal operations. So Bob Jackson's going to go over the normal ops, so he's going to go ahead and start right now.
Yeah, the plan today is to have the safety meeting first, and then we'll go right into the business meeting and be out of here by noon, hopefully. And I remember Hal Lattimore had, it really depends on how much audience participation we get. Hal Lattimore was at the CD. He was famous for making a comment at the end of his little spiel out there. He says, "All right, folks," he says, "any of you have any stupid questions?" Dead silence, meeting adjourned. Now, we don't cooperate quite that way here, but the idea is if there are any questions, we'll address them, bring them up as you see things. This little toy here, I really love this thing. I had never seen one before. Well, this is 20 years ago. I hadn't seen one before. I was doing a thing to a group of mechanics for Amtrak, and the guy gives me this. He says, "Try using it." I said, "What is it?" He showed me. He says, "I have the best fun with that thing." He says, it gives my cat a sexual whatever. Anyway, so I've adopted it since then. And following that, I was teaching up at Hack, and someone had borrowed it from me and not returned it. So I went out and bought another one. I came into the class, set it up to show the class, and one of the guys came up to me and said, "You can't use that." He says, "It gives me vertigo." He says, "I'll get violently sick to my stomach if you use that thing." So did it get used? I never heard of that, and I didn't know what happened. Anyway, what I'm going to do is to go through something that probably very few of us in here have done very often, and that is go through the procedures. Can we?
Hey guys, we don't have a microphone.
Yeah, I got to talk a little louder. Okay,
everyone needs to just
get over the hubbub. I guess they can't hear me all the way over there. But anyway, this operations manual is 77 pages long, and I doubt that many of us in here have read all 77 pages. So there are some things in there that are important and a few things that have changed. So at the risk of boring everybody, I'm going to go through quickly some of the things that I think are in the operations manual that we should know, but I encourage you to go back and read it. We'll have a copy, of course, in the clubhouse. And so, without much any other comments, we'll go to the first thing.
You went to?
I went two.
Is that it? No, you went three.
There we go. This is sort of an amateur night at computers for me, but I actually typed that stuff in there myself. And here are I picked out some of the, oh my God, I got that cat's going to have an orgasm if we had a cat. Anyway, what I did was just pick out the things that I thought needed a little emphasis, and I deleted a lot of the superfluous stuff, just the highlights. But if you want the detail, you can read the ops book for yourself. Anyway, no member may fly as a pilot in command without a field orientation and endorsement by a master instructor. That seems pretty obvious. It's a pretty good idea. A member may not fly a club glider as pilot in command unless he has been checked out in the specific make and model by a master instructor and an endorsement made in the logbook. And that is it suggests a lifetime. You know, you don't have to check out in the K7 more than once in your life. And by the way, you better hurry up and check out of it if you want to, because I don't think it's going to be around much longer.
You don't check out of it. It's already sold.
Yeah, it's already sold.
That's right, you can't fly it. Well, you can wish that you had checked out then. A checkout in a similar glider at another location does not qualify. A backseat checkout in a two-place glider qualifies the pilot to fly from the front seat, but not vice versa. That's a change, and these changes were all approved by the board of directors, so they're not just thrown in there willy-nilly. This is a change. If a member has not flown a glider for 3 months, he must have a supervised dual flight with an instructor prior to operating club gliders is PIC. That's not a change, that's been in the ops book for quite a while. If a member is a private member, private glider has not flown for 6 months, he must have a supervised flight with an instructor prior to being PIC in a private glider. In other words, it's 3 months for club gliders and 6 months for private gliders. All pilots acting as PIC must have completed the Special Flight Rules Area Training Course. That has to do with Washington and so forth, and I think everybody here knows about it, and if not, let me know. It's a special little test you take online. Mostly has to do with frequencies of seldom heard airports down there. But anyway, you have to have it, carry it with you in case they ever check up on us. Student pilots must have current logbook endorsements by a flight instructor and be directly supervised by an instructor at the time of launch. I think that's a slight change. We had the question of whether you have to be on, as an instructor, you have to stand on the ground until the flight is finished successfully. And all we've changed it to say just at the time of launch. So you don't have to, the student flies for 4 hours, you don't have to sit on the ground and wait for him for 4 hours to come back.
Question,
Yes.
what about if the instructor's in the air? I had that occur to me as an OD last year.
Well, it says at the time of launch, you have to be supervising. You can't supervise somebody if you're in the air, I don't think.
I didn't know how strict we were about that.
Well, we haven't been terribly strict in the past, but I think the idea is to have the instructor there to make sure it's safe to fly, the wind isn't too high a level, and the guys, yes, Danny?
Bob, it says an instructor, so it doesn't have to be his instructor, right?
Well, I don't think we have such thing as his instructor. Well, maybe we do,
Well, it's a
but
primary
an
instructor.
instructor is what it says, and that's what it means. In other words, if there's a student out there and he wants to fly, we ought to have somebody who knows something about the wind conditions and the field conditions and stuff like that, to make sure that he knows what he's doing before he, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's important to know that that means each launch.
Each
So if a
launch.
student's gonna fly 3 times, that instructor needs to be with him before each launch,
Yeah,
because conditions change.
Well, Bob, this is a change. It used to say by the student's instructor.
okay,
This is a change to say any instructor may do that, correct?
that's a change. I didn't realize it was a change, but I see that it could, I believe it could be any instructor. I mean, we all, as instructors, know what we should and should not allow a student to, under what conditions a student should be allowed to fly. Okay. If a member has not flown a glider for 3 months, he must fly with a master instructor before using club equipment. If private owners haven't flown in the past 6 months, they must fly with a master instructor prior to flying a glider. I think we just put
Well,
that
that's just a
down there.
review, right?
Pardon?
That's a summary.
That's just a summary of it. In addition, members must fly with an instructor. Oh, that's a change.
That's the change.
Master instructors must fly with an instructor every 2 years. Now, that means any instructor and any glider. You're already checked out a lifetime if you've checked out in the K7, but if you're going to fly, you have to have a flight with an instructor every 2 years, and the 2 years starts from the last time you had a flight check, and if you haven't had one for more than 2 years, we were going to say March, you have to get it done by March, but since we don't have any club trainers at the moment, 2-place trainers, or both the groves are off being spruced up, the deadline now will be July 1st. Yes?
A question.
Yep.
I thought that had said that the last line, all MASA members must fly with a MASA instructor every
Yeah.
year.
I was just gonna ask that question.
Right.
It should be.
It should be a master
Should be.
instructor.
Yeah, we don't have any other instructors from other places. If it's not written that way in there, it may be that I just shortened it when I put it on the screen. It has to be.
Suppose they go to some other site.
Yeah.
Yeah, that somebody goes to state college and says,
No.
I flew with Tom Ross.
No, that doesn't count.
No.
That doesn't count. It has to be a master
And
instructor,
they
yes.
get their BFR somewhere else, doesn't count.
Yeah, I thought the purpose was to have
If you get
everyone in the
power
club fly.
BFR.
Wait a minute, Kathy.
I thought the purpose of this change was to have everyone at MASA fly with a MASA instructor at least once every 2 years.
Exactly right.
That's exactly
That's what
right.
it should say.
Okay.
If the book doesn't say that, it should, and I probably just took the word out. I shortened it.
Not the second, but.
Okay, next one, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just windy conditions. We're always talking about whether or not it's safe to fly, and this is rather lengthy because I didn't know how to make it any shorter. Let's see, the scheduled tow pilot is the primary responsibility for deciding when the weather has become too hazardous to continue flying or unsuitable for starting operations. Now, he's supposed to confer with the OD, but the tow pilot's the guy who's gonna say, you know, it's too windy for us to fly today. And that's the way it has always been, although there's been some discussion about who has the overriding authority on it. But if the tow pilot won't tow because it's too windy, then it's not likely to be a flight. All right, let's see. Operations may be terminated if either the OD or the tow pilot considered it hazardous to continue. In the other case, neither the tow pilot nor the OD may decide to launch. If the conditions exceed the limits of this section, operations with wind speeds or gusts above 17 knots require a person on each wingtip of the glider walking, and additionally on the tail of the 233. It doesn't say in there. It probably does on the next one. Oh, yeah. This is a little lecture about the 233 with the tail sitting low. What I put it in here for is, with steady or gusty winds exceeding 22 knots, club gliders must be returned to the hangar. With steady winds or gusts reaching 30 knots, tow planes should be returned to the hangar. Operations must be discontinued and club equipment put in the hangar whenever the number of people present falls below the number needed to safely operate. Now, I'm not sure what, we have launched out of there in the winter on wave conditions with winds pretty high, but the rule is 30 knots.
Well, those are club gliders.
Pardon?
No.
Well, club airplane, club tow plane.
Pilot agrees.
Club glider, yeah.
Tow pilot agrees for right.
Well, it says tow planes will be returned to the hangar. We pushed that one a little bit on some of the windy days with people who have had experience. And we've had some very good flights in the winter with very windy conditions, but we've also had a real disaster out there with Fred Mueller, as you probably know. Four people, as you don't know, 4 people launched, 2 got away, got up in the wave and went off, 2 came back and ridge-soared on Ski Liberty for a while, 3rd one landed without problem, and then Fred came, and since he had just become an airline captain the week before, he was feeling his oats and went out there and flew on this windy day, and he got the speed too slow on his approach, and the wind stopped blowing, and he nosed over like that, and he almost pulled out before he hit the ground. He hit the ground at calculated 6 degrees, and I didn't do that calculation. Instead of 3 degrees, which would have been safe. But anyway, he got banged up very badly, had to quit working. I don't think he'll ever fly a glider again. He is back flying airlines, but he had a pinched nerve or destroyed nerve, and that affected his foot, his rudder abilities, and so forth in the airline. So it was kind of a sad thing. But in retrospect, we looked at his record. He hadn't flown that glider in a year. So here he is out on a very bad day, windy conditions, newly minted airline captain, but he wasn't current in his glider. So that's just, I think most of you know that story.
One other comment, I'm not sure how many people know this, but we did have a 233 that was being taken back to the hangar and it actually lifted off the ground. So that's another, that's the reason for the two people on each wing.
Okay, next. Let's see. This is a little change here. Takeoffs are normally performed on the pavement using runway 15. Climb out is straight ahead, followed by a turnout in either direction. But we did have John Tomko, who has a red barn out right off the end of the runway, and I've been on a crusade for as long as I've known John to keep people from flying over his house. He told me that when we fly over his house, he can't hear his wife. It sort of begs for a comment, but I didn't go there. But anyway, John was very instrumental in making sure that developer didn't put in 1,200 houses right in front of us. So he was a good friend of the club, and we tried very hard honor his request. Unfortunately, he died last winter, so the restriction doesn't apply anymore.
Still
but-
can't hear his wife.
But what I think we're all doing as tow pilots is starting a turn right after takeoff. And the reason I do it, I always turn to the left, or usually turn to the left, and start a turn. I turn rather abruptly to get away from the trees if the wind conditions dictate that there's going to be turbulence over the trees. And when you turn to the left, you're all lined up with our emergency landing strip, which Dave and I discovered last year. But anyway, you have that big soybean field, which is perfect for landing down. You got the emergency strip down there, so I recommend a turn to the left. But turn to the right is okay, but they're just, the fields over there are very good or not so good, depending on what time of the year it is. But anyway, we straight out and then make a turn as soon as you're safely 200 or 300 feet.
Bob, have we had any issues with the guy who built the house right on the extended center line from Corinda?
I think he's certifiable. I don't know why. It's a beautiful house, very expensive. It took him 10 years to build it, counting the road and all. Why he put it there, I don't know. I met him. He's a real nice guy, and I said, you know, we don't want to cause you any problems. And he said, no worry. He said, I'd like to when he goes to sell the house, maybe he won't. I don't know. It's a dumb place to put a house. The zoning allows it. There's not much we can do about it, and I don't think. I'm fearful of the day when some resident is going to say, I don't like glider operation anymore, and I'm going to bring suit or something like that. But we've changed the deed restrictions in the area, so the deeds are all mentioned. Glider operations, you know about it if you're going to move into the community, and that's about all we can do. And as I will say, he's a very nice guy, and he seemed to be very accommodating. And we've tried to do this whenever we've not received many complaints on noise, but we've gotten 2 or 3 over the last 10 years, and we've gone immediately to the people and told them we'll try to change our circuit a little bit so we can avoid making noise on Sunday morning. But not a serious problem at the present time. Okay, gliders are normally assembled in the designated assembly areas depicted on the next figure. Prior to the beginning of operations, gliders may be assembled on or adjacent to the north end of the runway as long as vehicles and trailers are cleared from the area before operations begin. That's been sort of a bone of contention for a long time, and I think the way we've been doing it for the past, well, this year has been fine. I haven't heard any real problems, but obviously we've got to get out of there before the operations start. Automobiles and trailers should not be brought into the landing operations after the start of the operation except for the purpose of staging a glider or retrieving the glider from the landing area. Doug Laptook is going to rent us a little gator-type vehicle this spring to see if we can, for retrieving gliders. When gliders land in the grass, if they're being cautious, they land in the middle third of the runway, and that blocks us from takeoff operations. So we don't have a good vehicle. We have to go over and get somebody's car, and sometimes that gets stuck. Yes?
Is there a test to drive the gator?
Pardon?
Is there a test to drive the gator?
Sign off.
Yeah, you gotta have a sign off by laptop. It's gonna be his. Anyway, all such movements should be coordinated with the OD. Taxiway must be kept clear at all times to allow access. Yeah, we very often have intruded into the taxiway area, particularly down around the main hangar. We take the gliders out, put them across, and then the tow plane can't taxi down from the lower hangar to the launch area. Next. Okay, traffic patterns provide a predictable means of operating in the vicinity of the airport. Massa has a paved runway and a grass landing surface on either side. Now that's sort of an official designation. We don't have a grass runway on the left or a grass runway on the right. We have a runway, and we have landing areas on both the left and the right. It seems like sort of a technical definition, but that's in fact the way the FAA describes it. And let's see, normal glider pattern is left-hand pattern to the grass landing surface on the southwest side. normal toe plane pattern is right-hand pattern with a grass landing surface on the northeast side. Now, that's a change, and it's been discussed for at least 2 years, and it was passed by the board of directors to go back to what we've been doing for the past 30 years, and that is to encourage gliders to make left-hand patterns and stay out of the way of the toe planes, which are making right-hand patterns. And we've discussed and discussed and discussed, and maybe it's not the best way to do it, but everybody that has pitched in on an opinion thinks it's better this way and safer. So that's the way we're gonna do it. Now, you can land from either direction, on either side, on any of the 3 landing areas. In other words, if you're in trouble and you're on the right side, you can make a right-hand pattern. You can land on the right or the center or the left, depending on what the emergency is. But normally, we'd like to have the gliders on the left-hand pattern, landing on the grass on the left side. And so that's the way we're gonna try it. It worked well for a long time, and we'll see how it works this way.
That paragraph doesn't mention the hard surface landing. Is there a preferred direction for that?
No, either way.
Really?
If you're a glider, left-hand pattern, land on the hard surface. If you're low and have any concern about getting back, or for wind or any other reason, you're air sick or whatever, or have a passenger who's having a fit, you can do what is, in the pilot's opinion, the most safe thing to do. And that means a right-hand pattern, you can land a right-hand pattern, you can land on the paved surface or the right side.
I think maybe what he's getting at is, we normally land on 3-3, take off 1-5, and that's the standard.
Oh, I didn't understand that question, yeah. I've never yet seen anybody take off on 3-3.
I have.
And you're here to tell about it.
I didn't do it, but I've seen 172s come in.
We used to do it.
Use our field and then take off
I've heard horror stories.
on 3-3.
And they cleared Jim Chick's house by about 5 feet, and his wife doesn't like that at all. So we just don't take off to the northwest. And the traffic pattern diagram at the wind side says that. Anyway, we take off downhill, and that's one of the advantages of this airport for gliding. Not many power pilots come and visit us. Just that screwball that comes by once a week in the top end. He made the unfortunate mistake of doing acrobatics over the chief of police's house up in Gettysburg, and the guy, I know him pretty well, the chief of police, he said, hey, he said, this nut is doing these acrobatics over my house. He said, you don't know who that might be, do you? And I said, no, he said, but here I have a picture of him. I took it with my telephone. He showed me the picture. And so the guy, he's going to jail if he does it again. Pardon?
Yeah.
It's a decathlon or a decathlon anyway. If he's over 1,500 feet, he's in the airway. If he's under 1,500 feet, he's violating the altitude restriction. But anyway, he's a little reformed, but not much.
Bob,
Yeah?
so in this condition, it's not recommended for people to come from the right side and land on the left side of the ground.
I don't think that happens very often. It happened with me because there was somebody on the right side.
Okay.
So I moved over to the left side. And I've done that with a tow plane too. I mean, traffic on the hard surface or the right side, I land on the left side. But it hasn't happened very often. I don't know why you would want to take a right pattern and land on the left side unless there was an emergency of some sort. But it's okay. It's the pilot in command who makes a decision on that.
But it's okay to make a left pattern to the right side.
That's correct. Well, if your trailer's on the right side and there's nobody in the way and the airport's free, we've been doing that for years.
What about hangar landings?
That's what he's talking about. Look, that is a change, and as I say, much discussed, and
Well, I just thought that comment that you thought that was kind of nutty to do a right pattern to the left side, but yet you're promoting a left pattern to the right side.
well, there is one difference. When you're making a right pattern in there, you got some trees in the way, and you can't really see very well what's on the right-hand side. You got to be careful because you don't have good visibility left side. It is okay. It's inconsistent, but the reason is if you have your trailer over on the right side.
Well, the main thing is to keep the tow planes and the gliders.
Yeah, pardon?
It's really-
The primary objective, as Mike says, is to keep the tow planes separated from the gliders.
So everybody should be aware, just because the glider's in the left-hand pattern, doesn't really mean he's gonna be on the left-hand side. Most times, yes, but you gotta watch it.
Disregard the
Just
right.
like you do with the other ones.
Keep your eyes open.
Okay, visiting traffic, we've now, somebody put that frequency, 123.3, on the chart, I understand, and we got it paid on the taxiway. We only had one problem that I know of in the past 5 or 6 years, with some guy coming in and landing, some student pilot landing the wrong way. Okay, next. Use of radios. This is another change. All aircraft are outfitted with panel-mounted radios. Tow aircraft also have transponders. The FAA requires the transponder to be on and set the appropriate code. NASA strongly urges the use of radios by all pilots. Operational radios are required for all gliders who are operating during the TFR. Glenn's going to talk a little bit about the TFR. But the change here is that we don't have to ground the glider if it's a good day and the radio isn't working. We've operated for years without radios at all. Radios are certainly a safety factor and encouraged, and they're used, and they are used quite a bit. One of the things, in my opinion, they're used too much. Down at Frederick, I couldn't get a word in edgewise, ever. And so people, I think, like to talk on the radio more than they like to fly. But it's a zoo down there, and so I know when I was in the Army, I went to communications school, and the master sergeant said, "Look, buddy," he said, "the radios are for emergency only. If you talk on your radio, the Russians will know where you are and they'll shoot you." I kind of remember that lecture.
That should be our policy.
Pardon?
That should be our policy.
I like that, let's put it in the bylaws.
But radios are obviously a safety factor, and we do use them, and I think we use them pretty well. Some people are a little more talkative than others, but we haven't blocked out anybody. Well, we did block out one guy. He landed in the mud because he called down and said he was, I forget who it was. Anyway, he was in the Grove, and he was a new member, and he came around, and he wanted to know where he should land because the field was kind of soggy. Should he land on the hard surface runway or the grass? And he couldn't get an answer because he got 6 or 8 answers. And he couldn't figure, I was in the tow plane, I couldn't understand any of it. And he finally landed in the mud and went immediately right up to the fuselage in that sloppy mud in the spring on the southwest side. Okay, I think that's about the end of the slides. I got any more? Okay, end of slideshow. Thank you all very much.
Hi, so Mike hit me up early in the week about doing the TFR discussion. I think everyone's familiar with it, but it doesn't hurt to take a look at it once again before we get flying. So, oops, guess I hit the button. Local area, we've got P40, 4009 sitting there. That's the whole P40 Camp David piece that we normally talk about. The bigger white part, and that's the TFR that we're going to be discussing. And then, right there's us. So just a couple little things, P40 sits about 8 miles south of the airport. It only goes up to, not including 5,000 feet, but it is continuous. Over top of it is that restricted airspace. So you can, in theory, with permission, overfly it. I don't know of anyone that's ever done it in a glider, but if you have enough margin that you can stay above 5,000 feet and you want to take your chances, you could always ask Washington Center. And it goes up to 12.5. What we're really concerned about is when the president goes up to Camp David. So at that point, the airspace expands to 10 nautical miles. That's that white line. You can see us. Anyone notice anything else new on this? Anything look odd on this chart picture?
They're showing the glider actually.
Frequency.
Yeah.
Oh, we got it changed. Excellent.
I sent you an email on that months ago.
No, but I checked and it didn't have, it was in the flight directory, but it was not on the charts.
Yeah, it changed. It actually changed in October, but when the new chart came out earlier this week, they are published. So we are now officially 123.3 all the time. So that's a major victory.
You did that, right? Yeah, Dave Pixton gets credit for that, so that's great.
And,
Yeah.
So 10 miles up to 18,000 feet. Okay, when that happens, because we lay inside of it, we can only operate under a waiver. So we're going to talk a little bit about that waiver. The key parts of the waiver is the burden is really on the ground. The OD or whoever's helping the OD has a series of phone calls to make and get it activated and all that. And every year we have to renew the waiver. We got to submit everyone by name with their aircraft and all that and get it approved. But the risk is all when you're airborne. You know, you screw up the TFR, you can lose your certificate or worse. So how do you determine? Easiest way, you know, and probably the safest because it's recorded, is go ahead and get your own flight briefing. That way, you know, if they tell you it's not active and it turns out it was and you flew into it, there's a recording at the FAA that says they told you wrong. So the part about losing the license may not happen. If the worst happens, oh well, you're still dead. DUATs equally as good. You can go online. I found glider only folks that don't have an active medical. DUATs is hit or miss whether or not you can get in.
I have a question. If we're operating a privately owned or powered airport, you all put into the waivers for just the gliders, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the future, can you include those members that also have power planes? You don't need it.
Yeah. Doug, let me go one-on-one with you when we go to do the renewal. I think we can do it. I've actually tried to encourage at least one other club member to do it in the past, and then he decided not to. I think we can work it maybe even as a standalone waiver for you, or we can tag it on to
But
the
I'm
club
not the
one.
only one though, because there's gonna be 4 or 5 power planes that have to go on that floatway in the next year or so.
So, I think it's workable if you just file a flight plan
Okay,
and do it on a day-to-day and not worry about waiver.
okay,
But let me talk to you one-on-one.
okay.
The FAA does have a website that they have all the TFRs throughout the country, and you can find the text in there as well. And they keep up to date. And then the last one's worst case. They're impressive. Okay, so once we get this thing activated, yeah, it really shouldn't have a lot of impact on the operation. I know there's a few of you guys out there that stay away from the TFRs there and all, and that's a personal decision. But it's really not a big deal. The one limitation is we're not hanging around the airfield. It's ingress, egress only. We gotta get the 2 miles outside the ring. No thermaling inside of it, except if you're coming back and you can't make it, the runway's fouled and you got there, do what you need to do to stay safe. And we'll explain it to them later. The other issue here is student pilots. The waiver, or the TFR NOTAM says no student flights.
No student trainings.
Yeah, no student training. The waiver does not address it. I've never brought it up. Okay? I do student flights now because I'm outside the thing. I'm the pilot and commander and instructor. I'm flying it out. I'll even come in doing S-turns, you know, letting the practice coordination and turns coming in as long as we're meeting all the criteria. I will not, however, solo a student in the TFR. I recommend no solos of a student in the TFR. Okay, we do have our students on the list and everything in most cases. If they've been around for a cycle to get in, they are on there. But, you know, maybe it's self-preservation on my own part, but, you know, they're flying on my certificate. If they violate the TFR, I'm held responsible. I don't want to answer that mail. There is a 4,000-foot entry. You want to be in under that. And the only reason we did that is just kind of predictable for them. They're sitting up a little bit higher even if they're orbiting with the
What was that altitude?
4.
4?
Not above it.
Yeah, you're going to come in way under it. You know, you're going to be coming in those entry points, you know, in the, 2,000, 2,200 range. I've come in, I think, as low as about 1,900, but that's getting a little tight. And then there's a speed restriction of 70 knots indicated, and that was set up just to kind of keep us out of the ground, keep us in the ground clutter, so they don't see us as much.
And that, the 70 knots is airspeed, right?
Yeah.
Not ground speed,
You have to have the glider on the approved list?
Mhm.
You have to have the glider approved?
Yep.
Since when?
Day one, it'd be what, 2003? Okay,
Well, I might not be up to date. but-
you are.
Okay.
However, you know, people buy and sell gliders. You know, we catch it every time when we do the contest update. You know, guys all of a sudden register for the contest with a different glider. And we gotta make a mad scramble, getting them on there. So, the list is published on the website. There's a green book that has all the procedures with the phone numbers. The list is in there, and it's generally on the OD board, you know. By the time we get towards the end of the cycle, it's allowed to be gone because of wind or something, but it should be there. Look at it, make sure you're on there, and make sure the glider is up to date. Now, I'm trying to, each name has a glider associated with it initially where we did it. I think the way I did it last year to see how they reacted is I kept it separate and just gave them a list of gliders, a list of names. They want to be able to look and see a tail fin flash or an N number and say, yeah, we know that glider. They don't necessarily need to know who's in it. So if the glider is on there, you know, if all of a sudden, you know, Mike decides to switch with Paul and, you know, fly the LS3 and let Paul fly in, they're not going to know the difference. They're both on the list, both the gliders are on there. I think we're okay. I'll continue to work that.
Sure they'll know, if the ones I'll outrun them.
And again, Bob already mentioned the fact you have to have the radio in order to operate in the TFR. Important thing on the radio is if they fail, we're not grounding them. But that doesn't mean you don't tell anyone the radio's broke, because eventually we're going to have a TFR, and now it is grounded, and we could have fixed it weeks ago if somebody had told us it was broken. So,
Excuse me, is that a regulation or a rule?
that's a regulation.
Regulation.
That is stipulated in the FAA, in the waiver.
Is there a definition of radio?
WMAL, nah, doesn't work. An aircraft radio, you gotta have, be on the frequency. In the case of the glider, you're gonna be on the departure frequency and then 123.3.
When does a handheld come?
Right, that's my
It says
question.
a radio.
Right.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, is there power output and range, anything? They just say a radio.
Right. They wanna be able to talk to you when they intercept you.
Right.
Okay, takeoff. Generally, they give us 134.5. They're gonna want the tow plane on that all the time. You know, so keep the chatter, you know, the speed calls and all that. If it's critical, make the radio call. If it's not critical, use a visual signal or live with it. Left turn out, away from Camp David. And then just tow out of the airspace, glider will get off, head out of the airspace.
One thing, everybody should be aware that the co-pilot won't be on 123.3, especially if you're both landing at the same time. Look out for that.
Good, I can skip the next slide. Okay. I recommend gliders stay away from the entry points, and I'll talk about that a little bit in either the next immediate slide or the one following. And then the glider comes in through the pre-coordinated quarters. Okay, so here we are again. And there's our two checkpoints. So one of them's kind of a no-brainer, and that's that golf course. You got the big quarry up there, and you got the golf course. The second one is a pond, okay? It doesn't matter, okay? There's 5 ponds within 2,000 feet of the pond. Okay? It doesn't matter. I had to have something to give them. And I was able to give them a picture of the pond, say, yeah, that's what we're gonna fly over, okay? It just doesn't matter, and I'll show you why. So the ingress is you go from these points, you fly up to the northwest corner of the airport, eventually entering into a downwind leg. Okay? If you're coming in from the pond and you're getting low, shade it and join midfield or go right to base. Do what you need to do to get out of the ground. Okay? The key to this is those lines don't matter. The waiver talks about flying a 1 mile corridor from that. Okay? We wanted a cutout. They wouldn't give us a cutout. We have a cutout. I keep telling people that, but nobody wants to listen. They all want to fly dead over the points. Okay? You don't have to. We got that whole area to come in, spread it out.
Thanks, Len. Let me just add, what works well with the tow pilots is to go out to the pond, you'll drop, descend towards the golf course, and by the time you get down to pattern, you're coming around the corner of the golf course and right into the
Yeah.
pattern.
I mean, that's what I tend to do. I tend to, they come off, I'll work my way back out this way,
Yeah.
and I'll come in here. I'll turn well short of that to come in on an angle, just to kind of pick anyone up off the right side.
Hey, did Gettysburg change the name of their airport? Is that what that, Southern Adams County?
No, Gettysburg's up here, Mike.
Well, what is, I don't think I've ever seen
That's,
that.
That's the heliport.
that's a little heliport. I think it's a hospital.
Hospital.
Yeah. Okay, so you got that corridor to work with, so use it. Okay, I already talked about the congestion at the entry point. So everyone tends to congregate. A lot of times they'll head there, they'll just circle entry point, waiting until they get uncomfortable enough that they decide they really gotta come in. It's one of the reasons we always advocated the radio call coming in. That includes the altitude, you know, what entry point and what your altitude is, just so people can deconflict. You know, you're gonna tow out on that 134, 15, or whatever they give us for the day. But once you get off tow, you know, switch over to 123.3, enjoy the day. When you come back, stay on 123.3, make all your normal entries. Be cautious of the low arrivals. You know, you're sitting out there, you're coming in low. You know, you happen to pick the day with a decent south wind, you know, and all of a sudden you find yourself getting cut short, you know. Pull up short, enter the left-hand pattern, and land. Nothing wrong with flushing to the right side, you know, to land on the right side, provided you have the altitude. And then that last one that Tom pointed out accurately is the radio frequency. This is my biggest concern with the TFR is we got the tow plane operating on the center frequency, the airport's operating on the other, and the possible conflicts. If you have a second radio, it might be good to monitor it. 5.8 Lima has a new radio in it. It's the only one that we have that, because it's new, you know, the new trend in the radios have a dual listen capability, and 5.8 Lima can do that. You can set it up to listen to 123.3 while you're on the 134.15. And it works. I've only used it once or twice without the TFR, so without a whole lot of chatter. And it does work. I mean, at altitude, I've done it where I've had AWAS at Hagerstown and just try to have some background noise to see if it works. And it does work. But that's an option for the tow pilot, if they improve situational awareness.
When you're doing the monitoring, can you tell which frequency is which?
No. It seems to me, and it makes sense that it would, the dual frequency seems to be reduced volume. But no, you can't. Bo did the drawing for us to commemorate an event. We have had an intercept we've been pretty lucky through the years. We've had one intercept, wasn't our fault. They made a mistake, glommed onto our guy, forced the tow plane into Gettysburg. And I think we had one that was our fault where we didn't follow the procedure and called up and said, sorry, and all was well. Stay calm. 121.5 is what they're gonna try to talk to you on. Probably aren't gonna remember that when they pull up alongside you. You know, unless you've got a background where that number is built into your head. They're gonna hold a sign up, but you probably won't be able to read it either. You're gonna be so nervous.
You can read it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
You know, take a look at AIM. It talks about the thing. You know, most of the procedures in there at night and all that stuff. But you're not going to worry about that. Bottom line is, you know, don't try to solve it with them over the radio. Just say, okay, you know, if it makes sense to go to back home, tell them, hey, I'm going to Whiskey 73. Talk to you on the ground. If you're outside of it and they want you to go to Gettysburg and it's equal distance, go to Gettysburg. But you know, don't get into an argument with them over the radio. You know, they do have real bullets.
But that drawing of the helicopters doesn't do it justice. Think of the size of the Pawnee as it is and double the size of the helicopter, and that's about what it looks like on your air tip.
Yeah. And, you know, it was actually, and Dave was the stuckee, he got intercepted. And it was over and reversed within 5 minutes of landing at Gettysburg. They realized they made a mistake and all that. But it was actually a good experience. It was early. It was a year or two into the whole waiver process. And I went out and I briefed a bunch of the helicopter units that cycle through because they never thought about, first off, they never saw the glider was on tow. The glider got off tow when the helicopter pulled up alongside and he beat. I don't think, Ed, you never looked back, did you? They never even thought about 200 feet of rope hanging out there behind the tow plane. Okay, that rope wouldn't have lasted long, but those are composite blades. You know, they would have done some damage. So it was good. It got us some FaceTime with the folks out there. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to get any response to do another one. So we need an intercept maybe, and then we can get out there and talk to them. And I just threw this one in. This is not TFR related. Bob mentioned it. But this is the training you have to do flying out of the airport and in most of our local flying areas, a ring defined around DC. The course has changed its number over the years. I think there's about 4 different numbers out there. The course really hasn't changed. Most of it's not even relevant to our type of flying, but it is required. If you've done it once, any of them, you're good. I keep a copy of the certificate. I printed it when I did it. I paste it in my logbook. So if I'm ever asked, I can produce it in a timely fashion. But
You guys don't keep track of who's done it or not.
that's between you and the FAA. But, you know, I don't know of any instance they've gone around ramp trucking for this compliance. I think the most common way they're going to find it is you have an incident, and then when they're doing their investigation of it, they're going to find out, and it's going to be one more nail in the coffin. But it takes about a half hour. It's probably a good insurance policy. And there's a lot of other good stuff on that FAAsafety.gov that pertains to our type of flying that, you know, we tend to forget about. So it'd be worth going in there every now and then. Any questions on the TFR? I mean, we've been doing it for, what, 13 years, so most of you folks have seen it a lot.
Not a question, just a thought. You mentioned altitude restriction of 4,000 feet at the entry point.
Yeah.
There's also a restriction at the northwest end of the runway.
Yeah, you want to be below 2,000, I guess is what we said on that. Yeah, good catch. I didn't bring that up.
Plus no soaring in the TFR.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a safety factor for the gliders and plus the TFR, but Gettysburg Airport is closing about mid-April to about July. We're resurfacing half of the runway. So in case of a TFR, like you had pointed out about going there, or if you're gonna land out or operate, it's gonna be closed.
Whose LS6 is that? I couldn't make out who was sitting in the, inside the cockpit there.
think that's me.
Who?
It could be me.
Okay, I was looking for a nice picture to sort of
Go ahead and
liven
see
it up.
if it'll sequence.
I've got a big picture of you.
Yep, there you go.
All right, what do you think? Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, morning, everybody. I'm Preston Birch, for those of you that don't recognize me with my new beard. Mike asked me at the banquet to talk about OD stuff for 15 minutes and didn't give me a whole lot of direction, and I didn't have a lot of opportunity to coordinate, so I wasn't sure how extensive this ought to be, but obviously 15 minutes sort of limited it. And the first thing I was going to talk about was documentation, but I didn't really think about looking at all the documentation that we have online until after I put my pitch together. And so I went back and I looked at some of the prior safety briefings, and Dave Weaver had given an excellent pitch on being an OD, and just about everything he had in there I had left out, unfortunately, but it's all great stuff, but a lot of it was stuff that was covered by Bob and our last presenter, Glenn. So the TFR stuff. So I want to focus really on the stuff that I think about when I'm doing an OD. One of the things that we get into is the business about how much responsibility the OD has for what's going on with flying the glider, okay? Things like currency and stuff like that. And so as a pilot like the rest of you, I think the pilot in command's got to take responsibility for following all the operations rules, all that stuff that's in the ops manual. So I'm focusing on more of the human related stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about documentation. The things that I worry about most as an OD, being very paranoid, I worry a lot. And I'll share some of that with you. And then my view of expectations on things that you need to do as an OD. Talk a little bit about tow ropes and hookups, the safety zone thing, which has been a little bit of a point of discussion among some of the members, and then a final word. So there's a lot of great stuff out on on our website, and I encourage all of you to look through it. It's probably something we don't do a lot of, but in putting this together, I thought, gee, somebody might ask me, you ever even looked at the OD's briefing sheet or some of this other stuff? There's good stuff there. I guarantee if you look through it, you'll learn something, or you will be reminded of something you probably hadn't thought about in a long time. So we have a lot of good resources online. We should all take advantage of them. And obviously the TFR stuff, Glenn did a great job going through all that. So what do I worry about? Well, the big stuff. It's stuff that most of us are either consciously or in the back of our minds thinking about. I worry about somebody getting hit by a glider or a tow plane during landing and takeoff. I also worry about someone getting hit by a moving propeller. You know, we work in a high threat environment, but one of the reasons why accidents happen is you're so used to it, you're around this stuff all the time, you get sort of numbed. And it's sort of like people that drive automobiles at 70 miles an hour down the highway or whatever. You don't really, you're not always thinking about the physics that's involved of what's going on. I worry about improper tow rope hookups every launch. You know, I'm just waiting for one that's going to result in a PTT. Haven't seen an accidental one, but it's not push to talk. It's premature termination of the tow. I haven't personally seen one of those. I think it has happened. I worry about mid-air collisions in the pattern as the OD with the radio. If you feel that somebody, I think the thing you worry most about is the guy like in the Citabri or Decathlon, whatever it is, who comes barging in to show off for us from time to time. People come in if they're on the wrong frequency or they're not making radio contact, we're not expecting them to be there. That is the potential beginning of a chain of events that could be bad. And so if you're on the ground with the radio and you have any sense that people aloft aren't aware of what's going on with that, I think you'll feel free to make an announcement. And obviously a collision between two aircraft on the ground, that would not be a good day. How does this happen? Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that we need to be thinking about and doing as ODs. Review the club ops manual and other relevant documentation. We already talked about that. There's approximately 8 pages that speak specifically to the duties of the ops director that are in the ops manual. I'm not going to say I'll read them all to you, but you should, at the beginning of the season, just go through that and refamiliarize yourself with it. Start getting your brain up to speed and thinking about OD stuff. Come to the field on time and be prepared. Don't let your fellow club members down. In some years in the past, we've had a lot of incidents where guys didn't show up for their OD duty. And when you do that, it's hurtful to the individual who has come to the field expecting to fly and now has to take on the OD responsibility. I didn't hear in the past year a lot of conversation at the board of directors meetings about this. Typically when it happens, we tend to hear about it. I tend to think, Mike, our performance has been better in this area in the last year or two, but I don't know what your perception is. I think people in general are doing a better job of not missing their OD duty. Do you have a point of view on that, or an observation?
I think it's been similar.
Similar?
Yeah. We have had, I do have to say that when that does happen, we've had a lot of people who step up and take over, and that's unfair to the people that are there just to go flying. All of a sudden now they're working on the ground doing someone else's job.
It really is, and I think Ricardo does a phenomenal job, getting the reminder postcards out to us. I personally find that to be very helpful. But we all need to work hard to not lose sight of when we have OD duty. And I know a lot of folks are conscientious when they have a personal conflict, trying to get somebody else to fill in for them. And I think the club generally has been pretty good that way. Trying to respond. Yeah.
What time is on time?
Yeah, I should have written that down. I made a note here, and I picked that up. Thank you, Dave Weaver, in his. So we're supposed to start at 10 o'clock, right? We haven't changed that this past year. So the ops nominally start at 10 a.m. and they go until whenever we're done. Mentally, I tell myself, you're going to be there till at least 6, waiting for the last guy, especially if boats flying, you'll be off in the hinterlands, but then you got to put the stuff in the computer and whatnot. So my advice is to shoot to arrive around 9:30 at the latest, so you can get organized and have everything out on the field and ready to go. You need to check the tow ropes. You want 2 tow ropes out there at the grid area, with at least one of them obviously laid out and ready to go by 10 o'clock. And it's especially important because students are looking to do their work in the morning time frame. Was there a question back there?
Yeah, you got it.
You got it? Okay. Yeah, I got a bunch of notes here that didn't make it onto here. Get a good night's rest. It's a grueling duty. If you're in your 20s or you're a teenager, it probably seems like a piece of cake. If you're in your 70s, it's a long, hard day from 10 to 6, being on your feet out in the sun all day. Bring food and water. We used to be real good about putting out a big water jug with ice in it and whatnot, but the gazebo's way off in the hinterlands. And the advent of bottled water, which has become ubiquitous I think most of us bring our own water to the field, but make sure you're properly prepared. Know your standard ground signals. It's in section 5.1 of the ops manual. Good to review that. Get yourself familiar with the launch procedures as well. One of the biggest pieces of advice I'd give you is something that Lance Knuckles is always beating into my head every time he sees me, is don't try to do it all by yourself. You know, there's a tendency to do that. People don't tend to congregate around the ops area as much as they used to with the gazebo moved over to the other side of the field. So you tend to be out there by yourself, and then we'll tend to want to be running wingtips and doing it all. When things get busy, you're going to need help. So,
if I can add to that, again, it's amazing when I come out and I see the OD. He's got all these safety things he has to do. Maintain it, but yet he sit there and loses situational awareness because he's out there hooking up gliders and doing other stuff while everybody's standing around talking about their flight. I get it, it's all about that, but the OD shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to say that till the day I leave this club.
Yeah.
Unless the OD is the only person there to do it, people should be stepping up to the plate and hooking. You see my students, if they're out there standing around, I get my whip out.
Yep.
Now they just go out and help, because the OD can't maintain safety vigilance if he's out there hooking up and doing all this stuff. Anyway, I'm done.
You're totally right, and I really appreciate that, and I think everybody else does too. The scheduling of AODs, is a huge help also, and sometimes you get somebody who's really, really experienced and can help you a lot. So that's a great aid to doing the OD job. Stay hydrated and use sunblock. If you've been around Soaring long enough, you look at some of the older guys, some of the skin damage and even stuff including death have come about from overexposure to sun. Neutrogena makes a real good one at SF85. I advise you to use it. I'm already seeing the effects of it myself, so I can't stress that enough. Keep your head on a swivel and don't fixate. There's a lot of stuff going on the ground, in the air, and when somebody comes along and starts socializing with you, the next thing you know, somebody's landed, you've missed a landing time, or worse, they might be coming right at you while you're standing out there. So, like I said, it's a high-threat environment. Need to take it seriously. We've got flags, paddles, and vests. I think Bob Jackson's been the big advocate behind getting those and using those, and advise you to all do that again to enhance visibility of the ops personnel. Don't let your guard down regarding landing aircraft. Don't assume that everybody knows. When you see somebody in the pattern, announce it, and try to help people, to keep people focused on watching the landing and keeping the landing area clear. We do get visitors. You've got dogs, children, people who don't really know gliding or aviation and tend to wander all over the field. They, approach them in a polite manner and clue them in about what the do's and don'ts are, and try to make sure that they stay out of harm's way. Monitoring the radio has become a lot easier now with just 123.3, but some pilots don't buy the latest charts. Some pilots don't bother to read the fine print and whatnot. So if you see somebody in the pattern, a power pilot, don't automatically assume he's going to be on 123.3. We can still monitor 122.9. If you don't hear him call in, you might want to be monitoring 122.9 to see what his intentions are.
When the TFR is on, can you monitor, would you have capability of monitoring the tow pilot frequency as well as 23.3?
I should let somebody like Mike respond to that.
Change the frequency on the radio.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Got
can
two
do
radios.
that.
I don't know if you can monitor two frequencies on that one radio.
Yeah, I don't think you
Yes.
can. I think it's one or the other.
You'd have to have two radios.
But I typically have two radios out there. I got the base station, I got one of the handhelds, and I'll keep them on different frequencies so I can
Yeah, but just,
jump back and
he's not
forth.
carrying that big box around with him.
No, but we have handhelds that you can strap on your belt
Yes.
and walk
A
around. That's-
comment on the 13415. I've had it on at my house, and I actually live higher up than where the airport is. That's Washington Center. You can't hear Washington Center when you're talking. What you can hear is you can hear the airliner talking to Washington Center, or you can hear an airplane talking to them, but you can't hear them. So as far as how much value that is.
I've actually talked to them on short final, but they're doing.
But you were in flight though?
Yeah, when they're doing the TFR.
Do they have a different
They're
antenna or
they're
something?
on that frequency, but yeah, they must have a different one.
Okay.
I was shocked when she called me one time, you know, at about 200 feet.
Because I've actually filed IFR and taken off, and until I was about 1,500 feet off the ground, they could never hear me. And that was during a TFR with an aircraft.
They just didn't want to
Yeah,
talk.
and this is.
They may not want to talk to me, that's
Yeah.
true too.
Okay, and the other thing is if there's anything you're not sure about, don't try to fake it. You know, ask and don't have any false pride. Ask somebody whom you respect, somebody you think is knowledgeable, if there's some procedure, something you're worried about, something you need clarification on. Regarding the business of pilot and command versus OD responsibilities, we've got these lists of who's current in what and who's on the approved pilots list and all this. As a practical matter, I think we've pretty much come to the conclusion that's expecting a lot of the OD to be always up to date on every single member's status for every particular thing that can happen. And so this gets into taking responsibility as pilot and command to follow the rules and not expecting the OD to be the one who can make that determination. So things like field orientation. If you look in if you look at Dave's presentation that he put together, you look at the ops manual. Things like field orientation, who's checked out in NASA aircraft, SFRA training, the 24-month rule, tow pilot qualifications, the TFR pilot list, landing patterns, all that stuff. That's pilot and command stuff, and the OD, it's not practical to expect that they're gonna be the enforcer of every little thing on, every minute of the day. All right.
Preston?
Yeah.
If you, as an OD, if you find someone that you haven't seen in a long time, or someone's face that looks new to you, it doesn't hurt to ask them.
Sure, and I do that, and that's an excellent point. Yeah, we should do that. And I've always had a positive experience doing that. People don't mind being asked. Good point. Okay, so proper tow rope handling and hookups. A lot of this is, gliding 101 kind of stuff where the rope condition's important, so looking for fraying knots and security. And when you do the hookups, making sure that, again, getting back to what Lance was saying, the OD shouldn't be doing this. Sometimes you do. I mean, if it's very light activity and there's not much in the way of help, you can do as much as you feel you can handle. We always let the glider pilot inspect the glider end of the tow rope. Important to remember, the little ring goes on the tow hook, not the big ring. That's the Schweitzer ring, and those go on 233s and 126s. We typically don't see many other Schweitzer.
133 now.
Yeah, good point. Thanks.
And 135.
Okay, yeah.
I think it should be noted that the little ring, for those of you who doesn't go on the Schweitzer, because who was it?
Yeah.
They were actually putting a little ring on the Schweitzer for a while, so somebody said, whoa.
Yeah, that won't work too well.
I built some ropes for a contest a few years ago, and some of them are just now coming into use, and they didn't have a Schweitzer ring on. So if you find those, set them aside.
Okay.
You don't use a toast ring on a Schweitzer.
Right. Yeah, we have a few more Schweitzers in the fleet up here.
Plus 133, 5.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is, once you do the hookup, make sure the ring is loose. It should rattle around in there. You should be able to ascertain that easily. The other thing I worry about is the Schweitzer tongue that engages the back end of the hook to make sure that's fully engaged, that the grass or something didn't foul it and it's just barely hanging on there. Make sure it's fully moved forward. And then, of course, give the rope a nice tug to make sure that it's secure. So here's one where we can have a little bit of discussion, because over the past couple of years, I've heard a little bit of difference in point of view on here, and that is, we've got traffic landing on the what I call here the glider landing area, and to the left of runway 33, the hard surface. So when we have gliders that land there, and they land a little short, how far down the runway do they have to be in order to allow the tow operation to proceed? And the thing I always remember, here we go, is that, I mean, from my early training, was always the 45-degree rule, and I think that was off the glider, that generally if the landing aircraft were behind the 45-degree line, then it was safe enough to go, and it's pretty unlikely that a glider is going to go scooting off into that area, given the slow speed with which you're going in the early part of the takeoff phase. I think the other rule of thumb has been the 90-degree rule, which I think is centered on the tow pilot, and there have been some tow pilots who, if there's anybody in front of that line, they're not going to go, almost no matter where they are on there. So I'm looking for a little feedback from the audience here on what you think we ought to be, how we ought to be operating.
Well, generally, probably I'll talk to the glider pilot and pilot that's on tow. If it's a questionable, call it all and say, are you comfortable with this? And leave it up to the tow pilot in many cases, because he's the guy driving.
Well, how about our chief tow pilot? Because I think that a lot of times it comes down to what the tow pilot feels comfortable with. I know I've had some discussions with Jim Chick on this, and I'm a little uncertain myself what rule we're following, and maybe this is something in the ops manual that we ought to add a little more information on. Do you have any thoughts, John?
You're probably right, because the safety line that you have drawn, how far does that go out?
Yeah.
And that's really the question you're coming to, because you can
That's part of it.
You can have gliders or trailers over near the tree line, and obviously you're
Right.
expecting that line to go out that far.
Right.
I've also seen that perpendicular safety line back at the nose of the glider, not the choke line.
And that strikes me as a bit excessive, to be worried about a glider that's parked right here, that somehow or another magically, as the tow plane starts to accelerate, this guy's instantaneously going to jump to the right and clog the glider. I mean, that, I don't understand the physics of that one.
It can happen.
Dan?
Preston, in my time here, I've seen more instances of people running across Petra roads in gliders than hitting things in that glider parking area.
Yeah.
So we have gliders that are spread across this way to stay behind that line, okay, but then, last year, somebody almost ran, into people that were staged well to the right of that.
So I think what Danny's getting at is, we tend to let gliders park close to the runway back in this, what I consider to be the grid area. Obviously, the overshoot area here, which is the main part of the runway, you're right, we've had gliders go zipping through there. There is always a possibility that somebody could land long, be at a high rate of speed, lose control, and go into the glider parking area. But I don't know if we're ready to start saying nobody can park gliders over here as long as that area doesn't extend out too far into the runway area. Obviously over here by
throwing out a caution that,
Yeah.
we're focusing on that when I don't like having my glider in that area there because of.
You're talking about what, down in this area
Yeah,
here?
right across there.
Yeah, nobody should be leaving gliders in that area, in my view. Dave?
I think it's a 40, from me personally, it's 45 degrees from where I'm sitting, and can I get the glider if I have to stopped before I hit whatever is in the way down there?
You're talking as a glider pilot or tow pilot?
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
glider pilot.
Okay.
In my time here, I've seen an LS6 loaded with water, drop a wing, and end up, he was just at the north end of the taxiway, and he crossed the grass at the south end of the taxiway and went off into the rigging area when we were rigging in that infield area.
Uh-huh.
Startled the hell out of me. So it can happen.
Yeah.
It's only happened once, but we've only had a tow plane eat a glider once, so.
Yeah.
All it takes is once to have a really bad day.
Was that at about a 45-degree angle, would you say?
Probably more than that, probably more than that.
It exceeded that.
I've seen gliders drop a wing, especially with water, and do a 435-degree turn and continue forward.
Yeah, so it can happen.
But usually the energy at that point, it's more than what, I think the 45 we're talking about from an initial motion there. I mean, I'm not a physicist, but I would say at that point, if they could make a 135 from sort of medium, just forging forward and cause that kind of damage, then
You have to have some form of
yeah, you have to have some energy
Right.
going there, yeah.
I mean, we're never gonna get to zero risk. We
Of
wanna
course
get
not.
to manageable.
Rick Fuller?
Yeah, I believe our practice has been that the perpendicular safety line was back at the nose of the glider, and we invoked or implemented a traffic cone at that point to let everybody notice they back from that line.
So are you saying that perpendicular to the nose of the glider, a line across here, that anybody sitting anywhere forward of that line, all the way out, even close to the trees, we're not gonna launch?
I believe that's been our practice as well.
Not to the tree.
Not to the tree line.
Not to the
So how, Dave?
If we get gliders that land, and let's say they're inside the 45-degree from the glider I'm looking at, and I don't like where he is because he's very close to the runway, and it's clear that no one could get stopped before hitting him. If he gets ground handled out over to the trees,
Yeah,
I think we're fine. Because it's unlikely, I mean, there's always a chance, I get that, but it's unlikely that in a normal launch, you're gonna get all the way over to the trees.
sure.
If you come unglued from tow in the first 20 feet.
So I'm gathering from this discussion that we're just gonna rely on our own judgment, good sense, and also a consensus with the glider pilot and the tow pilot. If anybody feels uncomfortable, then obviously
Stop the operation.
we stop until the gliders move.
I
Dave?
mean, the other thing that's important for landing gliders to realize is that we've got a grid of gliders getting ready to launch, and we've got an active operation, that it would benefit the whole operation if the landing glider taxis off to the tree line.
Right, right.
Rather than
Touch
stops
down and
dead
roll
center.
off.
So as you
Right.
slow down, you can taxi off to the side, and operations can safely continue.
Right.
And we may want to mark that with a cone, that this is the operation area on the grass, maybe a 200-foot path with a cone out there that says, okay, once you come to the stop, we need to get the glider past this point. If you can use it as an active landing strip.
Let's see, the only other thing here that I want to discuss was the business of crossing runways. You know, you get somebody who lands a glider, further up here, midfield across from the main hangar, and you say, darn, and you want to, and let's say it's a club ship, and you got to get over there. The shortest distance is obviously across 3 runways, but depending on the time of day and what's going on, probably not the best idea. I really discourage anybody going across any of those runways, when there is operations underway. So the safe thing is always come down to the end and get help and take it back that way and not do that.
The other thing to remember is down south parts of those runways, there are big swales on either side of in the grass on either side of the hard surface that could do damage to if you dropped a wheel in it.
Uh-huh. Oh.
You gotta go at an angle. You gotta
That
cross.
was my
Paul?
point. That was my point too, Preston, that crossing these runways other than where we normally do it, there are some pretty big swales and,
Yeah.
and jump ups.
Right.
And we've rediscovered how bad those are
Yeah.
in the past couple of years.
So I think as an OD, you really want to discourage people clipping across those runways. I mean, it's one thing if it's 8 o'clock in the morning and the dew is still on the ground and there's been zero activity, that's one thing. Or if it's the sun's about ready to go down or something and there's almost no activity. Again, you got to use good judgment. But in general, it's not what you want to have people doing, being on foot. And you don't know how vigilant they're being about looking for traffic in the pattern. And it'll only take one bad accident to make us all have a miserable day. Okay, the last topic then was just a reminder to keep your head on a swivel, be proactive. You see something that isn't safe, like the popular phrase today, see something, say something. Don't be afraid to speak up and stay safe out there. Yeah.
If you go back to your layout there.
Yeah.
Where would the OD be standing or sitting in this condition?
Well, okay, so there's a lot of detail left out of here, but I expect in general, the OD is going to be sitting where most of the glider hookups are occurring, and the taxiway that comes in from the road taxiway might be about here. So generally, I'm around there when I set up. Yeah, Paul.
Preston, we've had some people make comments about staging gliders in a place that does not allow them to taxi on and off the runway with their powered aircraft. And I've seen a habit where we keep marching these gliders further and further forward. And I'd like to say that, that gets people irritated if they have to land here or take off from here.
Leave the taxiway.
Leave the taxiway accessible.
Oh, blocking the taxiway.
Blocking the taxiway.
Is there rigging?
You've landed your aircraft, you want to taxi to your hangar.
Yeah.
You can't do it because there's a glider sitting in front of the taxiway.
Okay.
You don't have that. You don't have that on the drawing.
One item for future discussion. With the advent of electric self-launch gliders, which I'm a huge fan of, I think we need to examine the ground procedure for them, because what you have is what you can have somebody lining up on a grid full of gliders, but they have, if it's a nose prop, it's a prop that could potentially energize almost instantly and with no warning. Could happen inadvertently. One scenario, it might seem a little far-fetched. You could have a ground handler lying on the ground looking for a belly hook on this glider, because the glider's lined up for a tow. The glider pilot doesn't see him, isn't expecting to see him, accidentally accidentally energizes the prop or tests the prop or whatever. So it's a different state than we've encountered before, and I think it would be useful to examine the ground handling procedure for electric self-launching gliders at some point in the future.
Okay, yeah.
We currently have 2 in the club, and we don't see them much, but there's a 3rd one coming that will be active, I think.
That's a very good idea, because we've already had an accidental energizing of a prop of a plane. You're making a very good point.
So do the ones that you're talking about, these are aircraft with a propeller on the nose?
Right, with a folding nose prop. I mean, in essence, to me, what you've got is a power plane lining up amongst gliders and being treated as a glider. It's not a glider, it's a power plane.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's a very worthwhile point to bear in mind. Yeah.
I just suggest that we have something as simple as an anonymous safety suggestion box where somebody can write up anything that they saw happen, and I would be willing to be the and I'll confess my own sins first, the father confessor, and then maybe have it discussed among the safety officers or chief instructor, whoever might be involved. We don't even have a box for that, and I think we should.
Well, and the other thing, we've always tried to encourage anybody who has a safety concern to approach any of the directors to make sure that it gets reported and addressed, and not not forgotten, so I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Along these lines, I'm very excited to hear that we're getting some sort of tow vehicle that they can use. Getting people out of the way so gliders can land is something you want to do quickly. That'll help out a lot. Have we talked about who uses it? Does the OD have control? Do people moving their gliders around get it first? Have they?
I don't think we've gotten to that point. Typically, this club has always operated with people using their individual cars to go out and retrieve.
It's a nice thing to pull it around and say, hey, I can use the car.
Ready
Yeah. Didn't see that in the ops manual.
It's not.
No, here is
But the OD is basically the person in charge.
Yeah. I mean, where I learned to fly gliders was over on the Eastern Shore originally, and we always had an ATV, and that was part of the fun and the excitement of going to the field for the day was terrorizing down the runway, running through all 6 gears at high speed to try to get to the glider just as he stopped to get the rope on him, get him off, and tow him back. But that's another safety hazard too, is rocketing around the grass. And I know Kathy and I, years ago, we had a discussion on this when I first came to Mass. Was like, gee, how come I don't have an ATV to do all this? Well, the way we do things differently here at NASA. And, that seemed to work well for decades. But with this changing, I mean, there's going to need to be some education on that. Yeah, no.
So we are going to be getting a golf cart or something, is that the?
Yeah, 4-wheel.
That's what I hear.
Well, I think that's great because we're all getting a little bit older and, it's getting harder to push these gliders around. And it's a good safety feature. I think it's a very good safety feature because, some people's egos start getting ahead of themselves by taking the club ships and wanting to roll them right up to the past the safety line and ready to be put back on the runway again. And some people are better at gliding than others, and sometimes there's a tailwind. And when we push that limit closer and closer to Percher Road, it just increases the possibility that things get out of hand and we do damage to a club glider. So this will ease that, I think, and it's a really good safety feature to have a nice convenient tow vehicle to pull the gliders up easily.
But it's not without risk, and I'll give you an accident scenario for an ATV or this gator cart that we're talking about using, and that is, it seems obvious, but it's awful easy to forget. Now, you're sitting there on that cart, and you're ready to go forward. Before you go forward, you need to make damn sure there's nobody standing in front of that wing, because just when that glider moves, that first foot or 2 or 3, you can wind up breaking somebody's ribs, and I've seen it happen. So that's another accident waiting to happen if you're not careful.
And no using the ATV at 9 p.m. at night. Okay, guys?
Yeah, after several cruises.
No racing.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about this ATV, does it get fuel with aviation gas, or who keeps it fueled?
We'll figure that out.
Okay, well, it's just a thing to worry about.
Yeah, it starts to get complicated, doesn't it? Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
Can I make 2 safety suggestions? The first one is that pilots who are out in the field, keep an eye on your ODs and your AODs, because they're busy trying to run their ground operations and they get dehydrated really quickly. So if you see that your OD or your AOD is not really all that on the ball, make sure they're watered and fed and kept ready to go.
Or you could help them. You could actually send them away and do the job for a while.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing, is that if you need a break, don't push it. Get somebody to stand in for you, stop the operation or whatever, go take a pee break, get a bottle of water, whatever it is you need.
Especially the co-pilots, they have a grueling job.
That was like the one thing I noticed the most, like when I was thinking about safety in flight, the thing that happened to me the most last year was I was dehydrated on the line while I was trying to get everybody off. So I got sensitive that way. The second one that I noticed was that a lot of ODs were talking to planes, trying to get them on the ground for the next users, while they had aircraft in the pattern or getting ready to come in.
Yeah.
So be mindful of who's where and what, and try to find the most opportune time to talk to the plane while it's in the air. While planes are in the circuit, not the best time.
This is why you need an AOD out there. I mean, it does get busy. I know there's some people that feel, you must be a mental midget if you can't do all this, and multiplex like crazy, but, yeah.
This is kind of a trivial thing, but I try to cut the edges of the runways and that sort of thing to make it a little nicer when we're mowing out there, because when they do a nice job of mowing, they don't necessarily do cutouts around where your OD sits and everything else. But I've noticed that I make a cutout, nice short grass to keep ticks and fleas and all that other stuff off the guys, and then they set their chairs up somewhere else, you know. My question is, if you could measure from the end of the runway and decide where you would like to have your little safety zone for your people to sit, and you let me know, then I would, mow it out nicely, because it's demoralizing to mow out 40 feet and then have you sitting 20 feet from there in the tall grass. It's kind of silly, so you just measure out and say, okay, 25 feet from the edge of the runway, 10 feet in, or whatever, and I mow, then if you ever had Lyme's disease, you probably don't want it again, and a good way to do it is sit in high grass there with your pants up and fleas crawling up your legs, So that's just, and I also try to mow around the little gazebo there, so anybody sits at the picnic there is not sitting in high grass too. But if there's somewhere else you think you'd like to have mowed too, when I'm out there mowing another 20 feet, doesn't make a difference.
Okay, well, I really appreciate what you do for us, and I know everybody else does. And where I tend to sit, tell me if I'm wrong, is where the taxiway comes into our main runway. Directly across from there is where, and perhaps maybe just a touch back from there, but yeah, pretty much across from there is.
You want it across from the gazebo? Directly across from the gazebo?
No. If you look at the runway here,
okay, from the tire
so
down on the
here's
right-hand side.
here's the runway, and then the taxiway comes in. The gazebo's way over here by the door. But where the taxiway comes in, and that's generally where we'll be doing some of the hookups. Maybe back slightly a little bit from there. That's the area where I like to sit. Well, this has been a great discussion, so
thanks for doing it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to make this short because I know we all want to get out of here by lunchtime. This is the current list of qualified tow pilots that I have. Now, there's a couple names on the list that are not towing. Of course, Chet was going to tow last year, and then he got a job teaching, so he's not doing that. And then David Pixton won't be towing this year. But these are the current guys that we have. Yes? Dave, he's not. No. He's
not completely checked out yet.
Yeah, he's not totally checked out yet. And anybody else that wants to get checked out, please see me today because we want to get more people on the list, and we want to do that training in springtime when we get time rather than summertime. Things get going in the summertime, and we just don't have the time. Everybody gets real busy, so let's get it done in the springtime if we can. Now, the other thing is I've got 2 knowledge tests for all the current tow pilots. If you pick up the knowledge test and fill it out for both the Pawnee and PAA, that's just a yearly review of the numbers and so forth on the airplane.
You want us to do that if we've already got one on file, or?
Yeah, just as a yearly review, and I've got the answer sheet right here, so not, it's not. Yeah, it's not, so if you do it today, we can get it all filled out, and we get it on file, but it's a good review for us each to do. The club requirement is that I or one of my designees fly with you once every 2 years, and that's also an FAA requirement that you do 3 tows with another tow pilot that's rated or or simulated tow. So that club requirement also will fulfill the FAA requirement.
That's unless you fly sailplanes.
Right. Yeah.
If you're flying sailplanes, that
then
alleviates that.
That's true. But the club requirement is every 2 years. And please put that in your logbook and have that available. And keep track of it when you're coming up on your 2 years. Let me know so that we can get out there, we can do 3 takeoffs and landings and cut and fulfill that requirement, that club requirement. Okay. Additional pilots, yeah, we definitely need additional pilots. So anybody that's interested, let me know, and we'll get working on that. And we need to train in the springtime. And like I say, this is the current list that I have today, and then we can hopefully add to that in the future. A couple things, I'm just going to do a quick review on some of the ground signals and the launch procedure, because this kind of pertains both to tow pilots and to the ODs and the wing runners, rope runners, and so forth. Of course, this comes right out of our ops manual with the interlock fingers for the connect the tow line. And now here, when the tow plane is approaching, generally we come in from the taxiway or over on the grassy area in the tow plane's sitting position back behind the taxiway. If the tow plane will make a nice sweeping turn across the front of the sailplane, then it does a couple things for us. Number one, you're not depending on your brakes to turn the airplane, because when you start heading towards a glider with a powered airplane, you definitely don't want to be dependent on your brakes to not hit the tow plane. So if you just make a nice sweeping turn across the front of the airplane with your rudders, that will alleviate that nice slow turn. And the wing runner, or whoever's pulling the rope, should really be standing right in front of the left wingtip of the glider at that point, and then wait for the tow plane to come across, and then reach out and take a hold of the line with the cane. I've watched a lot of guys running ropes. They run over, the tow plane's parked with the engine down, and they run over and they grab the rope to kind of get in early. When you've got people running around the operation, it doesn't keep it standardized. And from the tow pilot's perspective, the best thing is to have everybody in the same position every launch, every time, so everybody knows where everybody is and can expect to.
It's much easier to pick the rope up on the grass than it is off the tarmac, if it's moving.
Well, that's true. And okay, so the wingtip should be pretty close to the grass, and you can take a few steps to the left and pick up the rope after the airplane passes by, where the rope is still in the air a little bit. But you're right, it is easier to get on the grass than it is on the asphalt. So then the tow plane comes around here and goes into position onto the runway, and at which point whoever's running the rope should walk over to this point, basically. At that point, as a tow plane pilot, I can see in the rear view mirror when the little pigtail is starting to drag towards the front of the tow plane. So I can pull out most of the slack before we even get in position and start doing the slack take up and so forth, because I see that pigtail start to come towards the airplane. At that point, the tow plane will stop, and you can signal me to stop at that point when the pigtail is getting close to the nose of the airplane. But if you leave the rope with a bend in it, when you then hook up the airplane, that gives me the ability again in the mirror, as I'm taking up the slack, I can see that bend come out of the rope, and I know exactly when the slack's coming out rather than to snag on the tow plane. It makes for a much smoother operation, and I can stop just as it's coming, as the slack's coming out.
I find that to be the most useful thing. It's impossible to see that darn rope if it's straight down the runway.
Yeah.
If it's across the runway, I will not be jerking you down all the way down the runway. So
Yeah.
please, let me have it sideways so I can see where it's going to come taut.
And if you stand out here when we're pulling the rope, like I said, we can see the pigtail approaching the tip of the airplane, and when we stop the tow plane, we'll only have maybe 10 feet of slack to take out, and it makes a nice smooth operation. And then with that little kink in the rope, we can see the slack come out of the rope and come to a taut position. At that point in time, of course, the wing runner is going to come over here, and the next signal is, he's going to obviously open the tow hitch with an open hand from the pilot, close the tow hitch from the pilot signal, and then the next thing is going to be take up the slack. The sailplane pilot signals the wing runner to take up the slack with the thumbs up signal. Wing runner signals the tow pilot by leveling the sailplane's wings and moving his arm from side to side. If the wing runner is not available, closing the canopy of the sailplane may be used instead. This signal should be given only when the sailplane pilot is ready for takeoff. At that point, we're going to hold and clear the runway and clear the pattern. And then at that point in time, the tow plane pilot will waggle his tail. The sailplane pilot, as long as they're ready, will waggle their tail. Everybody's checking the pattern. But we're really depending then on the wing runner to do the final check, because it's hard from the tow pilot's perspective to see, sometimes to see the waggle of the rudder of the tow plane, especially if we're using the Cub. You can't hardly see it. So we're really depending then on the wing runner to check those two signals and then do a full sweep of the pattern to make sure that nobody's conflicting in the pattern before giving the takeoff signal.
And please don't step on my wingtip if I'm in that line.
Yeah, I like that.
John?
Yes, sir.
I've found it's, for those of us with less than perfect eyesight, very helpful if the guy doing the wing running has a paddle or a flag or even the disc that the tow rope comes on in his hand, because I can see that through that little shaky rear mirror, where I can't otherwise, and you have to be very careful if you can't tell whether the line's coming out.
John, I'm out on the line a lot, and I hear pilots say, well, I don't see the tow plane wagging its rudder. Well, you don't actually have to. You really need to see if the wind runner is, if the glider is moving his rudder.
Yes.
And if they're watching for the tow plane to do it, obviously he's not going to take off till he's ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the glider that you need to confirm is ready to go.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And this guy is the most important point. He's the central focus right now because he's coordinating that effort between the two pilots and the traffic pattern at the same time.
What about radio check?
That's up to the glider pilot and the tow pilot. I mean, the tow pilots have their radios on, they're listening. Sometimes guys will want a radio check, sometimes they don't. And like we talked about earlier, we have the TFR situation that does complicate things a bit. So I'm just basically going over the hand signals that go along that would be used during a TFR operation, but we definitely have the radio to help that whole coordination process as well.
On TFR days, you can check your radio on the 20
Well, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, you'll need to, really.
It's good for the glider pilot to announce 8, 9, 10 Wi-Fi ready for takeoff, so at least the tow pilot knows exactly who's behind them if they didn't notice it. I hope they would notice it, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and the tow pilot should announce, it won't on TFR days, but should announce that he's taking off runway 15 and which way he'll be turning out after takeoff. And what I like to do, because I can't do 3 things at one time, as I'm pulling into position, as I'm taking up the slack, I usually make that announcement. So I'm not trying to make a radio call when I'm pushing the power up and I'm looking at the glider and I'm trying to get the airplane moving. So usually that call is a little bit, precedes the launch just by a little bit. Okay. Begin takeoff roll with the circular motion, as we all know. And then a couple standard calls. Stop operation signal to stop operation is made by waving your hand. Sailplane pilot also may stop the launch by releasing the tow line. Do not place your foot on the wing. Yeah, okay. Release tow line. And we can, this signal can be either to the tow pilot or to the sailplane pilot. In flight now, if you're going to box the wake, please let us know because sometimes we can take that as you want us to turn left or you want us to turn right because you're dragging the tail one way or the other. So if you coordinate that effort prior to launch, that will help the situation if we know you're going to be boxing the wake. And there's the opposite turn. Increased speed indicated by rocking sailplane's wings when positioned directly behind the tow plane. Decreased speed, I've never had anybody ask me to go tow slow. Sailplane is fishtailing using the rudder. Sailplane should be aligned directly behind the tow plane. Immediate release by the tow plane, rocking the wings. And then we have a couple emergency ones. Sailplane cannot release. Sailplane pilot moves into visual range of the tow pilot and rocks wings after making sure the tow pilot understands the signal. So sailplane pilot should return to the normal tow position. If the tow pilot cannot release, he will yaw the tow plane to indicate he cannot release. Tow plane cannot release, yawing the airplane. Not to be confused with something's wrong. Tow plane pilot indicates that something appears wrong with the glider by fanning the rudder back and forth. This rudder waggle doesn't yaw the tow plane. So if you see the rudder start waggling, maybe you better be thinking speed brakes or something not quite right with the glider. Okay, that's all I have.
On that last one, tow pilots, if you've got a positive rate of climb, keep going, because as soon as you fan the rudder, the guy's gonna get off. And if you do it, as soon as you break ground, we're gonna have an airplane in the trees. I've had it happen to me.
Okay.
And I knew it was gonna happen, so at about 1,500 feet, I fanned the rudder and immediately, guy got off tow full bores. Must have been fun.
I've had situations where I've actually pulled the rudder out, the spoilers out of a student or somebody checked out, and they're hanging out there for a minute, and not once did the tow pilot even give me an indication.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, I'd ask the tow pilot's going to occasionally look back there and, hey, that's it.
That is the advantage of the Pawnee. The Pawnee will tow anything up in the air, and it's got so much power.
Talk about the rudder wag, particularly 6-4 golf. I was involved in picking up the 6-4 golf at the maintenance a couple years ago, and the maintenance guy told us that he had repaired it. We had damaged the stops in the rudder. Guys were banging it from left to right, and we had damaged that stop. So when you do the rudder wag, you don't want to go from one stop to the other. Don't give a full throw and bang it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, there's
John, one more thing of note. Dave Sixton's brought up, over a series of years that we've got glider pilots getting off tow and going straight at them, no turn away. He uses that signal from the glider, i.e. I'm turning away, relatively smartly. He sees that wing and says, hey, the guy's off tow. And I'd like to remind everyone that's our operational procedure, is to turn away from the tow plane.
And the tow plane should turn and then proceed for a distance before.
He can't tell. He can't, with those, anyone who's ridden motorcycles, you can't see anything behind it, mirror that's vibrating like that. So if he sees that wing, it's his first indication that you're off tow. It's a confirmation that you got off.
Yeah, if you call me on the radio, you'll have a more accurate release out there. It's to your advantage.
Let's not overuse the radios. If we all get off at, typical 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 feet, and as you go through those altitudes, my practice is check the mirror. And if I see a guy's bottom of his wing and I can read his competition numbers, I know he's off tow. So I don't have to hear any confirmation, and then I can begin my descent. What happens is the guys will do a 15-degree bank away from, and you don't know whether they're just out of position or whether they're off tow, and so I drive straight ahead until I don't see them anymore, and that's where you end up with your... you get charged more because I didn't know you were off tow.
Yeah, and then the soft, sometimes you don't realize that.
Oh, the softening of the disaster.
Yeah, there's no need to do that.
Say that again, I couldn't hear.
The soft release?
Soft release.
Yeah,
where
soft
guys
release.
will gain some altitude and slacken up the rope and then release.
Yeah.
So you don't even feel them getting off tow. There's no need to do that from the tow pilot's perspective.
And also, you might see the rudder waggle, but everybody remember there's a radio.
Yes.
Spoilers out, spoilers, just that much.
Yeah, you do it definitely have the radio work. And like I say, I've got the knowledge chests for all the tow pilots. If you just kind of pick those up today, and we'll either give them back to me or put them in the file cabinet over at the office is fine.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Any questions?
Question.
Yes, sir.
On the line before you take off, are we still doing a rudder waggle?
Yeah.
I must have missed.
Yeah. Right. Usually the tow plane will waggle,
And then the glider.
the glider will waggle.
We're still
But like
doing-
it was pointed out, the tow plane doesn't actually have to waggle, but because he's not going to go until he's ready. Really, what's important from the wing walker's perspective is that the glider is definitely ready to go. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's the end of the safety meeting. Is there any other comments or any? None.
Excellent.
Excellent. Okay.
Excellent.
The Judge Loudmore thing. Okay, Next bit of business before our business meeting is we have an award to present, and it's the Gene Wilburn Award, and it goes, it actually is going to go to Richard Morgan. And the presentation, yeah, no, I can't see. It says, in appreciation and recognition of his many years of service in the arts of glider towing and aircraft maintenance.
Thank you very much.